Hello and welcome to another edition of Lab Matters, a webcast from Kaspersky Lab. I'm talking about Android threats today with Mr. Tim Armstrong, who is a malware researcher in the global research and analysis team here. Tim, I'm seeing in the news every day and reading about this exponential growth in malicious attacks on the Android platform. Is it really exponential, or is this a lot of FUD we're seeing?
I would say it actually really is exponential. We're seeing day to day. Even in the course of a year, we're seeing, where we would discover one sample a month, we see, several samples a day.
At this
a
stage?
day, yeah. And, versus Windows malware, maybe not so much, but that much growth over such a short period of time, it becomes important to, follow more closely.
When you say malware on Android, what are you talking about? Malicious apps or just drive-by type phishing attacks? What do you describe as how would you describe a malicious sample on?
Well, it's a number of there's a number of attacks that they're using. There's root exploits where it actually will give the application root access to the phone. As an administrator, you have full access to every feature of the phone. So you see things that will gain root access. There's things that collect data about the user. Things that are specific to that particular mobile device, so that it could potentially be copied for another criminal. You see things that collect geolocation information about the user, and then there are phishing attacks and your standard things that have happened. But mostly the most common thing is the premium rate SMS scams that historically have always been a part of mobile malware.
Has that been kind of geographically? The risk there is geographic, where it's happening mostly in Europe and some parts of Western Europe where premium rate SMS is big versus here in the US. What are some of the things you're seeing here in the US?
Well, so and traditionally it's been Russia, China, places that where it's easy to get away with these SMS scams. But we are starting to see it filter into the US now. There are new services coming out where they're not tied to a particular location geographically, so you can pull the same types of scams that you typically couldn't in the past. You all of a sudden can pull these off in the U.S., and we have started to see Android malware that takes advantage of that.
Right. We're also starting to see a rise in Android applications to handle things like e-commerce. Do you think in the future, as my mom and my dad and the average end user, the average mom and pop end user start using Android devices, do you think it's going to be entirely unsafe to do an Amazon.com transaction from your Android device? Or where do you see it going in 3 to 5 years? Keeping this exponential growth in mind and looking at, right now it's like you said, it's kind of limited to information leakage and privacy implications, but what are some of the implications for identity theft and some of credit card theft and things down the line?
Well, it's interesting because the most recent reports show Android being owning more than 60% of the market. And Google most recently at the I/O conference that they had really pushed some of the new features they're going to offer, like the wallet, things to do credit card transactions, and then in the last couple of weeks we've seen a lot of different things happening with SSL being becoming less trustworthy. So with all these different factors coming into play, you have a majority of people that are using smart devices are using Android, and on the Android platform, a lot of the new technology is based around transactions, so and we're seeing exponential malware growth at the same time. So with all these things coming together, I can only say that it's in the future it's going to become less and less safe to do transactions online through your mobile device. Assuming that other factors stay the same as they are now.
As the use of Android rises, give me your top 3, 4, 5 checklist things that end users should be doing to kind of minimize your exposure to that risk.
Well, number one, I would say it's to not root the device. It's kind of vogue to do that. Most users have really no need of it. Hobbyists and stuff sort of they'll do it sometimes, but. For the average user, it just
don't jailbreak the device.
Don't jailbreak it. It becomes defeats the whole security posture of the phone. Beyond that, you want to only install applications from sources that you trust. Absolutely. Android market. Even though we have seen malware in the Android market, it's probably safer to get it from a source that you recognize rather than what's called side loading, where you put it on the device from some other random location. And then the obvious things about using strong passwords, using PIN codes, using AV software, antivirus software, things that can track the location of the device should you lose it.
Things that can handle remote wiping, remote remote disable.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you very much, Tim. Very useful advice for our users. And thank you for watching another edition of Lab Matters, a webcast from Kaspersky Lab. You can check some other webcasts at youtube.com/Kaspersky.